Officer Daniel Ruiz had been on the force just under 3 years when he was assigned the overnight shift in a quiet suburban district outside Albuquerque. The kind of area where nothing ever happened, where the streets stayed empty and the houses slept with their lights off, where new officers were sent because it was considered safe, predictable, and uneventful. It was 2:17 a.m. when the radio cracked to life with a disturbance call, the sudden sound breaking the silence inside his cruiser. Dispatch reported movement inside a residence at 418 Wexler Drive, a house whose owner was currently out of state, which meant nobody should have been inside. Daniel acknowledged the call and drove through empty streets lined with motionless homes, their windows dark like hollow eyes watching him pass. When he arrived, the house stood at the end of the street beneath a pale streetlight, a 2-story colonial home that looked perfectly normal, untouched and quiet. Yet something about it immediately felt wrong. Not visibly wrong, but wrong in the way silence can sometimes feel too complete. He stepped out of his cruiser and approached carefully, his boots echoing softly against the concrete as he reached the porch. The porch light was on, even though the house was supposed to be empty, and that alone made him pause. He knocked firmly and announced himself, his voice cutting through the stillness, but there was no response, no movement, no sound from within. He circled the exterior, scanning each window, each shadow, until he reached the basement window, which was slightly open, just enough to create a narrow black gap that shouldn't have been there. He crouched beside it and shined his flashlight inside, revealing a concrete floor and stacked storage boxes, but nothing moving, nothing alive. Yet the air coming from inside felt cold, unnaturally cold. He radioed dispatch and requested backup before entering, following protocol, and returned to the front porch to wait. Minutes passed, and the silence around him deepened, pressing against his ears, until he finally contacted dispatch again to confirm backup status. Their response came, but the voice sounded faint and distorted, almost distant, telling him backup was delayed and advising caution. Against his better judgment, Daniel reached for the door handle and turned it slowly. It opened without resistance. The house inside was completely dark, the beam of his flashlight cutting through empty air as he stepped forward. The floor creaked beneath him as he moved toward the basement stairs, which were already open, waiting. He stopped at the top, staring into the darkness below, when he heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere beneath him. He called out and identified himself, but the footsteps stopped instantly, leaving only silence behind. He descended cautiously, one step at a time, his light sweeping across the basement floor, revealing nothing. No person, no movement, no explanation for what he had heard. Then his radio crackled, and he froze when he heard his own voice coming through the speaker. It repeated the exact words he had spoken earlier, the same tone, the same cadence. Unit 12 on scene. His breath caught in his throat as the radio spoke again. Backup has arrived, even though he knew he was alone. He slowly turned toward the staircase and saw a silhouette standing at the top, motionless and watching him. It didn't move, didn't react, didn't breathe, but its presence filled the space completely. As it stepped forward, the faint light revealed its face, and Daniel felt the world collapse inside his chest because it was him, wearing his uniform, standing where he had stood moments ago, staring down at him with empty stillness. The police radio repeated the words again. Backup has arrived, and Daniel ran. He sprinted up the stairs, through the living room, out the front door, and into the night air, his heart pounding violently as he reached his police cruiser and locked the doors. His hands shook as he grabbed the police radio and called dispatch, demanding immediate assistance. Dispatch responded calmly and told him he had never left his police cruiser. Daniel looked around in confusion and checked his body camera footage, only to see himself sitting inside the police cruiser the entire time, motionless, staring at the house, never stepping out, never entering, never leaving. Daniel resigned 2 weeks later without explanation. But before leaving, he filed one final report, and in that report, he wrote only one sentence. I responded to the call, but something else responded first. The house was demolished the following year, but officers assigned to patrol that district afterward reported that sometimes, late at night, their radios would crackle, and a voice identical to Daniel Ruiz would say, "Unit 12 on scene."
Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Officer Daniel Reeves had worked the night shift for almost 6 years, and in that time, he had seen things most people never believed when he described them. But nothing unsettled him the way that house did. It wasn't the worst crime scene he'd seen. It wasn't violent or chaotic. It was quiet. Too quiet. And that was exactly what made it worse. It started as a routine dispatch. The call came in just after 2:17 a.m. The dispatcher's voice came through the radio, calm but slightly confused. "Unit 14, we've received a 911 call from 227 Ashwood Drive. Open line. No response from caller." Daniel acknowledged the call and drove toward the address, the empty suburban streets stretching endlessly in the pale glow of his headlights. Ashwood Drive was a quiet neighborhood filled with identical houses and trimmed lawns, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. When he pulled up in front of the house, he immediately noticed something strange. All the lights were off. There was no movement behind the windows, no signs of life, no sound. He stepped out of his patrol car and approached the front door slowly, his hand resting lightly on his flashlight. The air felt heavier here, colder somehow, even though it was the middle of summer. He knocked firmly. "Police, is anyone inside?" No response. He knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. He walked around the perimeter of the house, shining his flashlight into the windows. Everything inside looked normal. Furniture was in place. Nothing appeared disturbed, but there was no sign of anyone living there. He returned to his car and reported back to dispatch. "Unit 14, property appears secure. No signs of forced entry, no occupants visible." Dispatch responded immediately. "Copy that, however. The call is still active." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's still connected. We can hear something." Daniel felt a chill crawl slowly down his spine. "What kind of something?" There was a pause. Then the dispatcher spoke again, quieter now. "Breathing." Daniel turned slowly and looked back at the dark house. He stood there for a moment, staring at it, his instincts telling him something wasn't right. But without signs of a crime or distress, he had no legal reason to enter. Eventually, he cleared the call and drove away, though the uneasy feeling stayed with him the entire night. The next night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the call came again. Same address, same open line, same breathing. Daniel was dispatched again. This time, when he arrived, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. The front door was slightly open, just an inch, enough to notice. He felt his pulse quicken as he approached slowly, his flashlight beam steady but his hand tense. He pushed the door open carefully. "Police department, is anyone here?" The house was silent. He stepped inside. The air smelled stale, like a place that hadn't been occupied for years. Dust coated every surface. The furniture was covered in thin layers of gray, undisturbed. But then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Footprints, fresh footprints. They started near the center of the living room, and they led toward the hallway. Daniel followed them slowly, his boots echoing softly on the wooden floor. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with closed doors. One of them was slightly open, a bedroom. He pushed it open. Inside, there was nothing but an old mattress and a small table. And on that table was a phone, an old landline phone. The receiver was off the hook. Daniel stared at it, then slowly raised his radio. "Dispatch. I found the source of the call." There was no response, just static. He tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy?" Nothing. Then he heard something behind him, a sound, soft, breathing, right behind his shoulder. Daniel spun around instantly, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. But there was nothing there. The hallway was empty, silent, still. His heart pounded violently in his chest. He grabbed the phone and placed the receiver back onto its base. The breathing stopped instantly. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel left the house immediately and reported the incident. The property records showed that the house had been abandoned for over 8 years. The previous owner had died alone inside, his body not discovered for weeks. No active phone service existed in the house, no electricity, no working utilities. And yet, every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., the emergency center continued receiving calls from that number. Each time the same thing could be heard. Breathing. No voice, no movement, just breathing. Eventually, the phone company disconnected the physical line entirely. But the calls didn't stop. They just came from a different number, an unknown number. Always at 2:17 a.m., always the same breathing. Daniel never went back inside that house again. But sometimes during his night shifts, he would hear the dispatcher pause briefly after answering a call, and he would already know what they were hearing. Because sometimes, he heard it too. Breathing. Very close. As if it was standing right behind him.
Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Officer Marcus Hale had been with the department for 11 years, long enough to see the worst parts of the city, and long enough to stop being surprised by what people were capable of. He was calm under pressure, steady with his decisions, and known for never overreacting. That was why dispatch sent him when something didn't feel right. On October 14th, at 11:43 p.m., a call came in from a woman into the phone. She didn't give her name. She didn't give details. She just kept repeating one sentence over and over. "He's standing in the hallway." Then the line went silent. The address traced back to a small single-story home on Briarwood Lane, a quiet residential street where nothing violent had been reported in over 3 years. Marcus acknowledged the call and activated his body camera as he pulled up to the property. The house looked ordinary, porch light flickering slightly as if the bulb were about to burn out. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no visible disturbance. He approached the front door and knocked firmly, announcing himself. There was no response. He knocked again, louder, and this time he heard something faint from inside, a soft dragging sound across the floor. He drew his weapon and slowly pushed the door open. It wasn't locked. The living room was dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner. The air felt thick, stale, almost humid despite the cool temperature outside. "Police department," Officer Marcus Hale called out as he stepped inside, sweeping the room carefully with his flashlight. The furniture was in place, nothing overturned, nothing obviously wrong, but there was no sign of the caller. He moved down the hallway cautiously, each step measured. The hallway felt longer than it should have, shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls as his light passed over framed photographs. He glanced briefly at one photo and stopped. It was a picture of a woman standing in the hallway of the same house, smiling at the camera. But behind her, partially visible in the darkness, was a tall figure with no discernible face. Officer Marcus Hale leaned closer to the frame, studying it. The figure looked almost blurred, like it hadn't been there when the picture was taken. He continued down the hallway until he reached the last door. It was slightly open. He pushed it slowly, revealing a bedroom that appeared untouched. The bed was neatly made. The closet door was closed. The window was locked from the inside. But there was no one in the room. No woman. No intruder. No explanation. He turned back toward the hallway when he heard it. A whisper. Very close. "You're late." Marcus spun around instantly, weapon raised, flashlight scanning the darkness. The hallway was empty. The whisper echoed faintly in his ears as if it had come from directly behind him. He stepped backward carefully, maintaining his stance, trying to rationalize what he had heard. That's when the bedroom door behind him slammed shut. The sound echoed violently through the house. His body camera captured everything, including the moment he grabbed the handle and tried to open it. It wouldn't budge. It was as if something on the other side was holding it closed. He radioed for backup, but the signal cut out into static. His breathing became audible on the recording, controlled but heavier now. He stepped away from the door and scanned the hallway again. The photographs on the wall were different. He was certain of it. The image he had just seen of the woman in the hallway was gone. Now the frame contained a different picture. It was him, standing in the same hallway, taken from behind, his uniform clearly visible, his posture unmistakable. Marcus slowly reached toward the frame and touched the glass. It was real. The photo was real, and it had been taken only moments ago. The whisper came again, louder this time, directly into the microphone of his body cam. "You're still too late." The camera suddenly tilted violently as Marcus staggered backward. The footage showed the hallway stretching impossibly long, the walls narrowing, the shadows deepening into solid black shapes that seemed to move independently of the light. His breathing turned into sharp, panicked gasps as he tried to steady himself. Then the video glitched. The screen distorted for 3 seconds. When the image returned, Marcus was no longer in the hallway. The body cam continued recording. It showed the front door of the house, closed, the porch light flickering. The camera was lying on the ground outside, angled upward toward the entrance. There was no sign of Marcus, no sound of struggle, no indication of where he had gone. Backup units arrived 7 minutes later and found the house completely empty. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints except Marcus's. No caller, no landline, no neighbors who had heard anything unusual. The house had been vacant for over 5 years. The previous owner, a woman living alone, had disappeared without explanation. Her last known statement to police during a wellness check was, "He's standing in the hallway." Marcus Hale was never found. His patrol car remained parked outside with the engine running and the driver's door open. His body camera footage was archived, but something about it unsettled everyone who reviewed it. In the final seconds of the recording, just before the battery died, the camera shifted slightly as if nudged by something unseen. And in the reflection of the front window, barely visible in the flickering porch light, stood a tall figure with no face, watching silently from inside the house. The case remains officially unsolved. But officers who have reviewed the footage swear that if you turn the volume high enough during the last few seconds, you can hear faint breathing. Not Marcus's. Something slower, calmer, waiting.
If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there are plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories so that you are able to enjoy upcoming content on the channel. Good night and sleep well if you can.